Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is October 3rd, 2019, and today I am so incredibly excited to be able to bring to you another Mormon Stories podcast episode. Today, we are going to be tackling an issue that has touched several dear and close friends of mine over the years, and the topic is alcohol use and abuse. And I cannot tell you how thrilled and excited I am to have a dear friend with me. Her name is Brittany Holley. I've known her and her husband Scott for many, many years. And Brittany is willing to do something very vulnerable, which is to talk to us about her journey as a Mormon out of the church or out of let's just say Orthodox faith. And then as she and her family started experimenting with alcohol, kind of what her experience was, and how she's battled with it or fought it or journeyed with it, and where she is now in overcoming alcohol. Let's just say alcohol abuse or alcohol addiction. So before we actually bring Brittany on, I'm just going to really do a quick plug for Thrive Day. For those of you who don't know, November 17th, 2019, we are so thrilled to have an event. It's an all-day event in Salt Lake City at the Salt Palace, where we're going to be inviting some of our favorite post-Mormons and one extra friend to talk about healing, joy, and growth and community after Mormonism. Think of it as a post-Mormon general conference, 100% focused on positivity, healing, growth, and community. We're bringing Wayne Sermon, the lead guitarist of Imagine Dragons, to keynote. We're also bringing Amber Scora, an ex-Jehovah's Witness, the author of the book Leaving the Witness, from New York City. But in addition to these amazing speakers, we're going to have several speakers that you know and love from the post-Mormon community, including Natasha Helfer-Parker, Christian Moore, John Hamer, Mindy Gledhill, Stephanie Sorensen Larson from the Encircle House, Donna Showalter, Spencer Nugent, Liz Dalton, Hans Matson, and Lisa Hacking. Those are the people that are currently slated to speak. Some of those may change. We may add some others, or some may not work out, but that's who we've got scheduled. We hope to have karaoke at the end of the evening, just a lot of fun, but it's going to be an amazing event to, again, promote healing, growth, and community. So we've priced it at only $15 a person. We're pretty much guaranteed to lose money. Just the AV and the venue is over $10,000. But we just want as many people as possible to come. So if you want to join us, please go to thrivebeyondmormonism.com and register. Please spread the word, and we would love to have a few thousand people there to have an amazing event. All right, so that's all I've got for announcements. So without any further ado, Brittany Holley, thank you so much for your willingness to come on Mormon Stories podcast.
Of course, John, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to talk about a near and dear topic to me, a Mormon faith crisis, and then mixed with, the aftermath and emotional fallout, and how I dealt with that, and how my husband kind of dealt with that, and kind of our journey through drinking and using alcohol as kind of a way to feel connected again, to feel, a little bit of camaraderie in life with neighbors, those sorts of things. We lost a community and we found another one in drinking. So just really a pleasure to speak with you. And yes, it is very vulnerable. But I feel like I need to tell my truth and be open about it, because I think that brings not only healing to myself, but to hope for others possibly down the road. So.
Yeah. And I'll just say that the reason why I'm so excited about this, one of the many reasons, is just that, over the years, I've had, several friends come to me and basically just say, "Hey, John, I never touched alcohol prior to joining the church."
Yeah.
And then I just started with a glass of wine at a meal.
Yeah.
or just an occasional beer. And now, it's grown into full-blown alcoholism. My marriage is in jeopardy.
Yes.
I may lose my house. I may lose my job. There's different iterations of it, but I just have had several friends have alcoholism rear its ugly head after, for many of these people, going their whole lives never trying a drop of alcohol prior to their faith crisis.
Right.
And so, we're not against alcohol or marijuana use, responsible, whatever substances. We're not against that on Mormon Stories podcast. We know it's going to happen.
Right.
But we do want people to understand the risks, and we want to, if people are one of the unlucky ones where they start having a bad experience, things get out of control. We want to help give stories of how to get better. And we've covered opiate addiction on Mormon Stories, but we've never covered alcohol abuse. So
super
that's
important.
what we're doing.
Yeah, it's interesting, just in my own research with alcohol and stuff like that is, people, it's such a culturally accepted substance that, we don't question it like we do opiates or other, substances quite as much. So I think it's important to bring it to light. It actually kills more than most drugs do in our world. So, I think it's, important to just note that it's a very accepted cultural substance that we use, and I definitely fell into that category of using it after my faith crisis. So, I thought it was completely acceptable for me and my husband to start, experimenting with something that maybe we would have experimented with long ago, but Mormonism keeps you from, doing those things if you want to, be a good, worthy temple recommend holding person. So
sure.
Well,
if it's all right, let's go back and let's just tell us a quick, a little bit about your Mormon upbringing, just so that we understand that you're probably like most of us in so many ways.
Yeah. So my family grew up in the church. As a teenager, my dad was my bishop, so obviously during those years of, where most people start, dabbling in drinking, I did not. I think a few of my friends might have. I really didn't hang out with those crowds because I was definitely your straight arrow Mormon girl, wanted to follow all the rules and, be worthy and, be on track for, temple marriage and all those things. As a youth, I worked on weekends to earn my own money to pay for my gas. And so I worked at a restaurant on weekends and didn't really have much time for that. I have a sister that did experiment with alcohol in high school, and she got in big trouble. So I, knew that there were serious consequences in my own family dynamic. I was focused on getting my personal progress done for, young women's program and those sorts of things. So it's just not something that I ever desired to get into. I knew it was bad. I'd been through the DARE program in school. The church says it's bad. You don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't do those things. And so it was just never a question whether or not I was even going to experiment with it.
Right. What did Mormonism what was the role of just the church in your, let's just say, teen and early adult years? Talk about what the church, how involved you were in the church, what your beliefs were, and what the church meant to you.
The church was it was my life, I was thinking this morning about that primary song, I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I know who I am. I know God's plan, I'll follow him in faith. And I just, it was my way of, believing in God. It was my way of participating in spirituality. It was, it was, part of my routine, my family life. I fully believed in everything the church taught me, as far as, God, salvation, Jesus Christ, his role, and I definitely took on as a teenager, as I, felt very firm and, in my knowledge of, those things and those truths that we talk about in the church, I was a member missionary. I introduced friends to the church who got baptized. So I was definitely took the role of being, I grew up in a place, I'm not in Utah or Idaho or some of those more populated Mormon areas. So I'm up in the corner of the Pacific Northwest, and I was
up by Bellingham, right? Up in Washington.
Yeah, just a little south of Bellingham. We're in this beautiful valley.
Is that where you grew up, near Bellingham?
I grew up kind of outside of Seattle.
Okay.
And then when I was 13, I moved up here to this kind of farming community area. My dad changed jobs within the same company, so we moved north. And I'd grown up with a lot of LDS girls my grade and my age. And when we moved up here, I was the only one. So I really took it upon myself to be an example to my friends about what the church was about, what teachings I followed, what, like I don't drink and I don't, do this or that. I don't have sex before marriage. Those things were just very, very firm in my belief system that those were the things I needed to, follow. And
were there other youth in your ward, or was it?
Yes. Yeah.
Was it a branch? Was it a full ward?
It was a full ward, and we definitely had a youth program big enough that there were girls, a little bit older than me, a little bit younger than me. Not very much in the way of young men my age, but definitely like there's a good sized population of Mormon, kids during that time, just in different wards, surrounding us. So, but I was the only girl in my high school, in my grade that was LDS until I recruited somebody. So,
recruited somebody.
Until I
That's
recruited
great.
somebody. So, I didn't want to be alone in my faith. I wanted to spread the good word. So I did. And, so, my dad was a bishop through my youth, or through my teenage years. And so I definitely upheld I'm the bishop's daughter. I have an example to set, that sort of thing, for sure. And so I definitely remember, this is actually a pretty religious community that I live in. And so there's Baptists, Lutherans, Methodists, all sorts of different denominations. And, we all would get in debates on the cross country bus about who was right about what, when it came to God and church and all that stuff. So it's, but yeah, I had a really, good upbringing. I had an amazing seminary teacher. She's a wonderful woman. And she, I definitely felt like she was a big impact in my, being strong in my faith and that sort of thing. So, and I did all 4 years of seminary and didn't miss a day. So
that's hardcore.
Yes. I had a plan, I had my checklist. And
so what was your life going to be like, as you're like graduating from high school?
Yeah.
What are the checks on your checklist?
Well, my parents were very big proponents of getting educated. So of course, college was on my radar. So I applied to BYU, Idaho, and BYU in Utah, and University of Utah. And I went to the University of Utah. So
okay. Now that's a little bit of a smudge.
I know. No, I'm kidding. My blood runs red. So
no, my daughter Clara has just started at the U this fall.
That's awesome.
So.
It's a great.
She's our first Ute. She's the first Ute in our family.
Oh, that's awesome. My grandparents all actually went to the University of Utah. So I was kind of returning home. My parents went to BYU, but I went the other direction. So,
but there, just so people are clear, and I want to get back to your checklist, but there's a long, multi-decades long history of faithful Mormons going to the U, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I was actually very fortunate in the fact that all of my roommates were actually members of the church when I lived in the dorms there. So
fortunate.
Fortunate. We got into a little bit of trouble, went to a club. I can't remember what it was called downtown. But it was it was a good experience. And, I was I was, my checklist was go to school, get educated, find myself my returned missionary, right? And, get married, have a family, and, beyond that, endure to the end, right? Fill my callings and that sort of thing. So, I didn't really think too far, beyond, marriage and family. I knew I had a career. I'm a nurse. I didn't finish school at the U because I got married at 19. So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, I know, right?
19.
19. Yeah. I
That's
do
almost a child bride.
I know, Scott, we joke about the cradle robbing and stuff that happened at that point. But, he was a wonderful,
How'd you meet Scott?
We met at church. We met it
in your ward?
In our student ward, like first week of school, no joke. So
of your freshman year?
Of my freshman year. And he was a senior. So, like
fresh meat.
I know. I was like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? But he swept me off my feet. So, it was such a fun and exciting time. And
how long did you guys date?
We met in September, obviously, when school started, and we were engaged by July.
Okay. So that's a long restraint.
Yeah, I know. Well, and we got married in December. So a 6-month engagement was, rough in the sense of, okay, we got to get to the end, got to stay worthy of that temple marriage. So, So
what'd you love about Scott?
Oh gosh, everything. He was playing the organ or piano or whatever for our student ward, and I was the chorister, and that's how we met. I mean, I had a calling like right off the bat, to be the ward chorister. So yeah, we met there, and then we went out salsa dancing with a group of friends and all that sort of fun stuff. He was very creative at like coming up with dates and stuff. Yeah, we went up to Mount Timpanogos and went cave spelunking, that sort of thing, and clay pigeon shooting. We went to concerts, symphonies, we just had a lot of fun, a lot of good fun.
Good, wholesome Mormon fun.
Yes, exactly.
Even at the U.
So it was a lot of fun. We had a great time, and, I just kind of fell in love with them. And, we had some ups and downs through our dating. I was kind of still, it was a lot of change, going from living at home to, moving out of the state for school, and then, meeting somebody and that sort of thing. So, there and trying to concentrate on school. I mean, we were there, my freshman year was the year of the Olympics in the Salt Lake area. So, we had a little bit of a break.
Was that 2002?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Scott and I kind of, I was really confused about what I wanted. I was like, this seems too fast, too quickly. And so over the Christmas break, we kind of split a little bit, and then kind of started hanging out again over the break during the Olympics, and went down to St. George with some friends. And oh my gosh, like I didn't even tell my parents that I went with guys and other girls and like stayed in the same hotel with them, And, I felt a little bit, rebellious doing that, because I was like, I don't think my parents would approve of, us staying in a hotel with boys, but whatever. So did it anyway.
So you guys got married. And what were your goals as a couple? It kind of like, what was the understanding of what your family was going to be based on?
Definitely centered around the church and callings, and, just raising our family in the church, that sort of thing. I mean, we had dreams of, gosh, it's so hard to think about like what we were thinking then. But, we were just kind of going through the, okay, we're married now, we've got callings in the church, we're making friends. We actually, 3 days after we got married, moved to Southern California. So, we had our ready-made church friends already there. And my grandparents lived there as well. So,
and of course the woman's education was expendable because It's all about the
Yeah.
guy's career, right?
Right. I mean, I followed him, but I was looking at getting back into school. I mean, I had a CNA certificate to be a certified nurse assistant. I ended up getting a job at a hospital down there while I was looking at getting back into school because I knew I wanted to be a nurse and I knew I wanted to make that happen. And so I wasn't quite ready to just start a family right off the bat. Because I wanted to make sure, I mean, my parents were always like, well, you never know what's going to happen. So you got to be able to support yourself. So I took that seriously. And I knew I wanted to be a nurse. So we didn't start a family right off the bat. And I looked at getting into school there in California, but Scott ended up taking a job shortly after. I mean, we were only there for 8 months. He took a job in Boston. So we ended up packing up and moving across the country. And so I did kind of just wait on school until we moved out east, and I got a temporary job while I was applying to schools out there. So yeah, I mean, everywhere we went, it's like we had our callings in the church, primary teachers. When we moved out to Boston, we were put as the librarians in the church library right away. And then not too long after that, I got sucked into the Young Women's program, and which it was so strange to me because I was like, I am not that much older than these girls that I'm teaching. I don't have a whole lot of life experience, but yeah, the church, it was our community. It was our group of friends. It was, something we relied on as a support system, as a spirituality system, belief system, all those things, were very much wrapped up in the church.
So did you end up going to nursing school in Boston?
I did. Yes. I did get into the University of Massachusetts, Boston. So we lived north of the city and the school was south, and I could just get on the subway and go to work or go to school. And, I was pretty sure I was like the only Mormon there, maybe, but, it was great. I really enjoyed, getting to know people there. It was definitely a different group. It's a bigger melting pot culturally and everything. So yeah, it was a good experience, but, I was definitely, still firm in my faith and, doing my callings and, working with the youth and stuff like that was really, fulfilling at the time, especially while I was in school. So.
And if I recall, Scott ended up at Harvard Business School. Is that right?
He did a while after. We went out there with this plan. Oh, we'll just be here a couple of years for this job and then we'll move back west. And then it's like I got into school and it's like, okay, I've got to finish my degree. And then when I was coming up on finishing my BSN, he wanted to go to business school. So he applied to some schools and got into a couple and we ended up choosing Harvard to stay there, in the area where we were. I had a job after school and everything lined up. So we stayed in the Boston area. So this is like 4 years after being there, he went to business school. So.
Okay. And that's pretty intense, that whole kind of Harvard friends, Harvard community, like
a
lot of intellectuals, Cambridge has a long tradition of sort of thinky, intellectual Mormons, right?
Yes. Oh gosh, yes. I mean, we lived right at the top of the Red Line, which is the same subway line that you take to Harvard and MIT and, stuff like that. So, and we were in the congregation that met right behind the temple there. So in Boston, and it was literally like 5 minutes up the road from us. So yeah, it was a very intellectual community. A lot of the people we went to church with were Harvard divinity students, stuff like that. So there was definitely, I would say, more of a liberal approach to Mormonism, I guess, in a sense. I mean, there was a lot more schools of thought happening there that I had not really ever heard before, I guess. So it was, I was like, this is interesting, or these people are very different than like Utah believing Mormons. But I think a lot of that had to do with culture as well. So it was an interesting experience, but I'm kind of a quiet person. I like to observe and listen and stuff like that. So I just kind of, just did my thing and listened. And, either agreed or disagreed or thought, wow, that's a way out there idea, about, religion or the church or the gospel. I haven't heard that before. So there was definitely a broader sense of belief out there, I guess, or just context of belief. But I made sure I went to the temple and did, my, baptisms for the dead with the youth, or went and did endowment sealings, and stuff like that. Throughout the time we were there, definitely,
And did you guys start having kids in Boston then?
We did. Yeah. So we did have our oldest and then our second a year before we left. But yeah, two of our children are from Winchester. So yes, they were born out there. So yeah, it was, entering new motherhood away from my family was, it was a struggle, but I had my friends at church. It was that were having kids the same time I was, which, you had this kind of bond in belief, bond in community, bond in motherhood. Those sorts of things definitely were a huge support system for me. So
we have a listener, Jody Arbin Aldous. She says, Holly,
yes.
love you, my friends. So some of your friends are joining us live.
Oh my goodness. I love you too, Jody, and happy birthday. Yeah.
So when is there anything else that's important about your story before kind of one of your faiths starts your religious faith starts unraveling? Anything else you want to say about that?
I guess I would just say, just to hit back on, I did, Scott and I traveled before we had kids. We went and revisited his mission. We'd been to Mexico several times. We definitely had a very full and rich life, together with friends, had a lot of fun. We learned how to be social without drinking before we even drank. So, which I think is an important thing, and it'll make more sense down the road. But, we learned how to talk to people without the social lubricant of alcohol, those sorts of things. I mean, we had these skills kind of already there. It's sometimes we lose our skills when we don't exercise them, but, we just, we had a very rich and full life. It was not complicated, I guess I would say. I think the nice thing about, our faith at the time is everything was very straightforward and comfortable, I guess. Nothing seemed too much of a challenge, but I also had this underlying current of feeling like I was on a spiritual plateau, that I was on, I had entertained some doubts myself about the Book of Mormon, but I just didn't give it the light that it needed shed on it, because we're taught never to do that. Taught not to doubt, doubt your doubts is, kind of like, okay, I'm doubting, I guess I'm just going to delve into my scriptures more and, work harder at my calling and things will be fine, but there was a comfort in that, even though it wasn't great, So yeah, I guess that's what I would add before we delve into that. So you
started to hit a spiritual plateau?
Yeah, I would say yes. We had done a Relief Society Book of Mormon reading challenge one summer. And this was the summer before this whole thing started to unravel. And I just remember reading it and feeling very differently about the book than I did as a youth, So I just got this feeling that this was a story, that Joseph, it was kind of like an allegory, this is his life transposed into this story, or I didn't know what was unsettling to me, but I just felt a little bit like that's interesting. I don't feel the same confirmation, I guess, like I did before about its authenticity.
And this was while you were in Boston still?
Yes. Yeah. So this was in 2011.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you're reading the Book of Mormon, you're starting to say, hey, something doesn't feel right. Did you tell Scott?
No. No, because
isn't that interesting that we don't tell the person that we love and trust most when we start going through this stuff?
yeah, and I think we tend to do that a lot with a lot of things. I think it's hard to be vulnerable and say, look, I'm uncertain about something when you've been giving off this, persona of I've got my shit together, I guess,
Yeah.
when we don't want people to understand we're struggling with stuff. But that's when we need it the most. And that's something I've learned along the way. So,
Okay. So did you start questioning before Scott?
oh no.
Oh, okay.
He
Okay.
actually, and I guess I should jump back just a little bit. He actually, when he started working for the business consulting group that he worked for out in Boston, when Google Alerts came up as a thing, Google alerted to have emails sent to his Google account about anything that popped up about the church. Or Mormonism or that sort of thing. So this was a couple years into our marriage, actually. And I remember we were on our fall foliage frolic, as we called it, because we lived in the Northeast. We got to go leaf peeping and all that stuff up in, Vermont, New Hampshire, and all that. He brought up his concerns about some things he had read that, kind of started making him question, and I shut him down. I totally shut him down. I was like, I can't listen to this. Like, I'm not going to listen to you. Like, you're about to rock my world if you start, going down this path. And I was very young, and I was very kind of naive to a lot of things, I guess, and yeah, so I just I didn't want to hear it. So I just was like, don't talk to me about it. Like, we're just going to buckle down and just keep this train rolling, So he shut down. And that's just like, I look back and I'm just like, that was a huge opportunity to connect. And I just cut it off. And so, but that's, I was working with what I had then. So I definitely, have moved past those negative feelings about what I did then. But
yeah, and if I can I do these very occasionally. I do a coaching moment, and I just want to say I've worked with many, many couples over the past year, mixed faith couples and couples who've left the church, and this is a pattern I'm seeing more and more clearly where one of the members of the relationship starts losing their faith. They try to share with the other partner. The other partner is a believer and they're very scared. They shut it down. And I'm so awestruck by the damage that can occur in the aftermath of that, where the non-believer just gets the message that they can't be authentic, that they can't be honest, that they can't trust their loved one with their vulnerabilities.
Right.
And that leads to secretive behaviors, that leads to resentment, that leads to a behavior of hiding, not because the person wants to be dishonest.
No, absolutely.
And it's not because the believer doesn't love their spouse.
No.
It's just so terrifying. And then you fast forward 1, 2, 3 years, and all sorts of destruction can happen just stemming from that inability to connect over something so important.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think, we definitely send messages we don't intend to send, I feel awful that I was just so shut down at that point, but I didn't know how else to be, I didn't know.
Of course.
I didn't know, the unknown is so scary. When I work in a system where I know everything about God and all this stuff, if you throw in a curveball there, I'm going to freak out, and I did. And I remember it just being very, depressing and whatever, but it just kind of dissipated and we didn't really talk about it after that. But
Sean's asking really quick.
Sure.
Are there any parts of the Book of Mormon you remember reading and seeing Joseph's life portrayed in the story? I mean, obviously for me, the ones that usually come up, the tree of life, the tree dream,
right,
with the iron rod and the great and spacious building. That's all a story that Joseph Smith Sr., Joseph's dad, had and wrote about and talked about prior to the Book of Mormon ever getting published. And then the fact that Nephi was a younger brother and had older brothers that could be a little rough. Again, that Joseph Smith had older brothers that, Alvin and
right off the bat, it was the Nephi story for me. It definitely just made me, and then given the context, as a youth, you're so gusto about your faith. Like you just want to believe it so bad, so you do, and you believe it for what it is. And you don't really have much else as far as context around it. As you grow up and see the world a little bit bigger, a little bit differently, I think gives you more context to the story. So that was definitely, I felt like I was reading a completely different book than I did when I was a youth. So
yeah. Okay.
And I don't know if that was a result of, being in a very highly educated, I was in school thinking a lot, taking classes in philosophy and stuff like, so in psychology and sociology, I saw the world a little bit bigger, had a little bit different perspective. So,
but even so, when Scott had come to you, you weren't ready for that yet.
No, because this was only 2 years into our marriage. So, I was just kind of in the beginnings of my going to school and seeing the world a little bit differently. But yeah, he definitely, through Prop 8, my husband struggled with that, with the church's involvement in California. So, he definitely, continued to focus, some of his doubts secretly from me. And concerns secretly from me. I was very much involved in school. And so, I was commuting for school. I was gone all day. He was working many long hours, traveling for work. So the real opportunity to connect and really have these discussions just didn't happen. And it was just the stage of life we were in, being very much like consumed with school, kids, life. That sort of thing. Church was just kind of on autopilot, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah. And that's so common for so many couples.
Yeah.
Sarah's saying, I'll have to reread the Book of Mormon from this perspective of kind of Joseph's biographical story. Sarah, a great book to read about that is Grant Palmer's An Insider's View of Mormon Origins, where he really does very well articulate the main 5 sources of the Book of Mormon for those who were open to believing that it wasn't a translation of an ancient record.
Yeah. And I was having these feelings about this, that before I even read Grant Palmer's book, because it just, and then when I read his book, I was like, oh my gosh, but that was a little further down the road.
Okay, so you start having doubts as you read the Book of Mormon in 2011. How did it go from there?
So, I just, like I said, I just kind of put a blanket over those doubts and said, I'm just not going to deal with those or dive deeper into them because, I'm working with the youth. I'm a mom, I've got this role as a woman, and a mother and faithful person to keep, plugging through it. So that summer, I had noticed some changes in my husband and they were changes like my husband loves to sing. We were in the church choir, those sorts of things. And I love to sing. And, I just, noticed him at church looking at him like, why aren't you singing the hymns anymore? Like, he just kind of shut down. And I was like, what's up with you? Anytime I was like, let's go to the temple, he was like, no, and and it wasn't like I was questioning like, well, why don't you want to go to the temple? It was more like, okay. And I just felt unsupported, I guess, in a sense at that point. But, I just,
and this is so hard because the non-believer becomes viewed as, well, you're not a righteous priesthood holder. You're not upholding your end of the deal. You're a slacker.
Right.
You're a spiritual slacker. And the believer starts to lose, their kind of not affection for, but like their respect for the non-believer, even though the non-believer's got good reasons. From the believer's standpoint, you're just being weak and feeble and not right.
Yeah, and I just thought, okay, like, he's busy, he's in school, or I guess at this point he was done with school and he was working a new job and stuff like that. So, and I was focused again on, my little baby at home and my newborn, my daughter, our second child, was born in December. And, we just, it wasn't until I just couldn't take it anymore. And I really was just like, all right, we need to have a conversation, like, what's going on with you? We were in the IKEA parking lot down south of Boston. I was just like, what is going on with you? And he just kind of was like, Brittany, I'm just really, struggling with this. And, the historicity of like the earth and dinosaur, like all this stuff. And I was just like, I just never gave it much thought. And he was just like, I'm really, having a hard time. And I remember I bought him Rough Stone Rolling like for Christmas one year, thinking, oh, this will, help him along his journey and learning about the church and whatever. And I just was like, so what does this mean? Like, what does it mean that you don't believe, in the historicity of the Book of Mormon or Joseph Smith's story? Like, he's like, there's different accounts to the first vision. And I'm just like, what? Like, like I was just kind of like, what do you mean? Like, there's all this other information out there. And I just, I was like, well, what does this mean for our eternal marriage if you don't believe this anymore? That really threw me because like we were supposed to be forever, this was, we'd been doing all the right things. How was this happening? So yeah, he slowly, he definitely was very much involved with, he had started listening to the Mormon Stories podcast, and he had started, delving into certain things, the LGBTQ, community and its place or non-place in the church became an issue for him. He just, he's got the biggest heart on the planet. And so, he just couldn't, and I see it now, there's just, you begin to question, is there a place for everybody? Is there a place for me, like in this system anymore, in this institution anymore? And so I think he began to feel that, as he was learning more and more. So, and I don't want to speak too much for what he was feeling at the time, but, because that's for him to say. But for me, I definitely just, my guard was up. I was defensive of the church. I was like, don't question my beliefs, like I believe these things solidly and this is why. And I was so confused and upset and I didn't know what to do. Like, to be honest, I was without resources on how to deal with a spouse that was questioning the church extensively to the point of non-belief. So yeah, in the middle of this, we decided to move back west to Washington. So we ended up it was definitely a strained time in our marriage, because I didn't really know what it meant, but we were moving back west. We moved closer to my parents. And he stayed back in Boston for about 6 weeks. I actually, with Jody Aldis, had Thanksgiving dinner with her and her family and packed up my kids and got on a plane. And Scott stayed behind to pack up the rest of the apartment that we had been in. And we moved back west. So it was a very dark and depressing Christmas and period of time.
Because of the Mormon thing?
Yes. Yeah. I didn't know what it meant. Like, I did not know.
What were your biggest fears?
My biggest fear was losing our eternal marriage was definitely something, I was scared. I think the unknown of what was coming down the road, because I didn't quite grasp what the full picture was going to be. And this is where just a lot of anxiety came in, depression for me. I was also a mom of 2 young kids. I had lived away from home for 10 years. I was moving in with my believing parents, in the middle of this, like, I don't know what's happening to my marriage right now. I just didn't know what was in the future for Scott and I. And it's, it's crazy to think that at this point, because it's like, I didn't marry him because of the church, but it's such an ingrained part of your relationship. It's just so enmeshed together, your belief system with your spouse. I thought we were one and the same. I thought we believed the same. I thought we had the same, everything. And so I just, it was very confusing and scary. And I just didn't know if our marriage could survive it, because, love is love. But, when you completely feel like your world's breaking apart and you feel like you don't know your own spouse, because then they're revealing all this stuff that you didn't know was there, it was kind of intimidating and scary. And so my defenses went up,
Yeah.
They definitely, I felt like I needed to defend the church. I felt very belittled when we would talk about anything, because I've always, my insecurity is always then, and I'm getting over this, but that my husband, he's a very smart man, and so it was hard for me to feel stupid. Like, is there something I'm missing here? And it felt very threatening to feel like he was on this different page than I was intellectually about the church. I'm like, I thought I knew everything, or I thought I knew everything. And then I was like, do I, and I remember, over Christmas after we moved, I got to this point, and I remember having a conversation with you, John, and it was either the day after Christmas, but you took time to call me on and walk me off the ledge. And
Did we do like a phone call with me, you and Scott? Isn't that?
Yes. Yep.
I remember I was walking around the track at Utah State University during my PhD program.
Yeah. So I'm forever grateful for that conversation.
So what did we talk about? Do you remember any of that?
It's very blurry in my memory at this point, but I just remember feeling much more confident that we could make it through this. And it sparked this idea that I could question things too. It's okay. It's okay to question. So we, had that conversation with you. I felt a little better. We were living with my parents. My parents picked up on something going on. We did not open up to them explicitly, like, we're in this faith crisis right now, or Scott is. And, we had a hard winter that winter. And I know he was involved with, Mormon Stories. He helped crunch some data for you, I believe, on the why people leave.
The whole Marlon Jensen,
Yep.
Hans Matson thing. Scott was a really important part of the data collection and analysis.
Yeah. So, when I hit the lowest of lows in the faith crisis period with my marriage was about February of 2012. And I just felt I had two choices. I could choose the church, or my family. Like, I really felt like it came down to that at the end of the day for me. And that's my own personal experience. But I chose my family, and I said, I'm going to open my mind to the possibility that I might be wrong about everything I've ever known. So, and that was a huge step for me.
Let me just ask you, I'm imagining there's a lot of Mormons out there that are like, what are you talking about? You don't have to choose between your religion and your family. You can have both. Tell us why you felt that you needed to choose. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I guess I couldn't really imagine if I still believed strongly about eternal marriage, the role of the temple, sealing, that sort of thing. Like, I didn't think I could be in a relationship where that wasn't a central part of it, and it's hard to explain, like, why I felt that. I look back, of course, hindsight's always different. We look back with new eyes every time we look backwards. But, at the end of the day, maybe it would have worked differently. If I had been in a different place of mind, I guess, maybe I wouldn't have felt that. But But I don't know. But I knew I had to open my mind. I needed to understand my husband. I needed to understand where he was coming from. And so I felt like I needed to go down that pathway. And I still went to church. Like, this was not like I'm done, I'm not going. I still stayed in the church for a year and a half after he talked to me about his doubts that first time in the parking lot. So,
and just to give my 2 cents on that too, like, especially the way we were raised as Mormons, and of course the church now in 2019 is starting to create spaces for progressive and liberal Mormonism, but certainly when we were raised, there was only one way to be a Mormon that was any way approved or official. So if you really take celestial marriage and temple marriage and all the covenants seriously, why wouldn't you want to divorce your spouse if they abandon all their covenants, right? So I'm just saying that's the conclusion that a lot of people arrive at. It's like, hey man, this is why we got married. This is the whole point of everything. This is why we're on the earth.
Right.
And if you're not on board, then
if you're not with me, then sorry, then
we're
over.
Done.
Yeah.
So,
So strong feelings, during that time, and looking back, it's like, no, I married my husband for other reasons than the church too. So,
thank goodness.
Those are still there and intact. So, so I felt, compelled to open my mind to, say, I might be wrong about this stuff. So kind of fast forward a little bit, eventually, like, he's so anxious every Saturday night. I'm like, just stop going to church. Like, this is not healthy for you anymore. Like, why would I request that you be here when it's so uncomfortable for you? So I'm questioning, reading books like Fawn Brody's, No Man Knows My History, Grant Palmer. I am talking to people in Facebook groups, Mormon Stories Facebook groups, listening to Mormon Stories podcasts. I just opened up this floodgate of information, which was super helpful, but also very scary. So kind of fast forward to the summer, I went to girls camp as a camp mom that summer because I was in the youth program again. And I had so much anxiety there, and I was just like, what am I doing here? Like, I'm not believing this stuff anymore. Like, I started seeing things as manipulative, or, it's like, very, very boxed in. I felt very boxed in the institution and in the church at that time. But I was still going because I needed to see it through. So I needed to see where I was going to fall, as far as my beliefs anymore. So as I was doing my own research and doing my own, thinking and real deep thinking, I spent, a lot of my hours of a day just thinking about religion, thinking about people, thinking about the world, thinking about stories and beliefs and the history of the church and how it fits into everything. So I just, after I got back from girls camp, I decided I was kind of done with the temple, took off my garments, and, felt very, very vulnerable in the sense of like, oh my gosh, if my parents see me in a sleeveless shirt, shame, shame, shame. Just like it was such an interesting period of time because I had one foot in, one foot out. Like, I'm going, and
I know Mormon women that like stop wearing their garments, stop going to the temple, stop believing, but they keep a pair of garments just so that if their parents or in-laws are in town, they can throw them on. Not to deceive, but just because they are afraid of what the reactions will be.
Absolutely. It is scary. We do things for other people to please them, to say, we're still good. We're still good here. I'm not off the straight and narrow path too far, but I just, as I was, kind of going through this feminist awakening as well, like, the whole women being responsible for men's thoughts, a V-neck shirt. I remember in one of our Beehive classes, a V-neck shirt was off the straight and narrow path. And I was just like, are you kidding me? Like, we're going to sexualize, and I was myself so uncomfortable in my own skin for so long. It was just like, then the table turned for me. But I just like all these things were kind of unraveling, and like the ordained women movement started kind of working its way through with Kate Kelly and everything. And there was the wear pants to church day, and I wore pants to church, dang it. So I was like, okay, we're going to step in here.